Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey everybody, and thanks for joining me on another solo episode of the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I wanted to dive into this topic today because it's been a conversation that I've had several times in the last few weeks. And so I thought it made a lot of sense to kind of dive in. I've talked about this previously in terms of, leading indicators versus lagging indicators. But I thought I'd share a little bit of a not really different perspective, but just a bit of a deeper dive, into kind of how I learned some of these lessons and applied them in businesses I was responsible for, how I actually applied in my own business today with the metrics that I track. And again, with the thought process of, I don't think any, KPIs isn't any new revolutionary thing, but I think the theme that I see, especially in the conversations I've had lately, has been around this idea that, more is better. And I get, makes sense, right? Like, hey, we have to have some data to measure in order to understand, is there an opportunity to improve? So on and so forth. But what I have seen in the few conversations that I've had specific to this is that most of what's being tracked really lends itself to this idea of just kind of reporting the news. It's what's already happened. And so what becomes very difficult about that, or what the problem really is that it's not actionable. Right. So everybody's like, yep, okay, makes total sense. So as you go through, whether you have it set up in a dashboard, whether it's individual teams that are monitoring and, sharing this information. Right. But what you end up seeing is that as somebody is articulating what the results are for any given set of KPIs, everybody else is saying, oh, okay, yeah, makes total sense. Like, I get it. Right. So thinking about how we shift from the like, yeah, okay, I get it, makes sense, to the, here's what we need to do, right? Here's how we can influence the next, month, quarter, what have you, right? So that's the gist of all of this. I'll share a couple of stories around this. So, first I'll talk about my business because again, I think that it's applicable for a variety of businesses. Having a consulting business, right? I could monitor a variety of KPIs, and I have. I've ebbed and flowed. I've looked at leading metrics. I've looked at lagging metrics. What I've really come down to for my own business, the only thing I really care about and that I, monitor and measure is a leading indicator. And that is literally the number of kind of valuable touch points. That's what I'm calling it, right? Like, how many touch points am I making in any given day? And, what's a valuable touch point, right? For me, that could be an email. It could be a newsletter. It could be a video. It could be a DM. It could be a phone call, a text message, right? It could be a networking meeting. It could be a sales meeting. It could be a prospect call, right? Any of those activities, I know from a leading indicator perspective, if I do enough of those every single day, I'll kind of never have to worry about the rest of my business. And what became really interesting when I shifted to this about I don't know, probably it's been at this point a year and a half, maybe 2 years at this point, that I really started to focus solely on those touch points, right? Making every touch point meaningful. And I think that's a big difference too, right? Like, it can't just be a throwaway, let's say, comment like, hey, great post, right? Like, nobody cares. But if you take some time, if you put a meaningful thought together on somebody else's content, if you put together a meaningful outreach to somebody, whether that's, again, medium doesn't really matter, right? Whether it's via text, whether it's an actual phone call, whether it's a video chat, a DM, right? All of that stuff. But when you put together something that's meaningful for somebody, that there's an actual reason you're reaching out, you're showing up as a human, you're just being yourself, all of a sudden things start to happen, right? You're building more valuable connections, more meaningful connections with people. You're really seeking to understand how you can help them, how you can support what they're doing, right? And then all of the other stuff kind of takes care of itself. It's super weird, right? That monitoring that, and I know how many I need to hit every day, and I know if there's a stretch of time that I get focused on something else and I'm not hitting that, KPI on a daily basis, after about, a week, 2 weeks, right, of kind of slacking, let's say, or not doing the work, right, I can see it. I can see it in interactions. And ultimately, that will continue to bubble up into revenue for me, profitability for me, right? So, again, just one example of how shifting what we're actually measuring and monitoring can help us to influence, what's happening. Because when I see that, right, now I know, like, hey, I can't let this go too long, because if I do, I'm going to start to see the impact from a financial perspective. So let me get back on track. Let me reset what my calendar is, or my priorities are, however you want to say it, right? But get back to the work that I know will lead to more favorable outcomes. So I want to. I don't think I've shared this story previously anywhere else, but I want to talk about kind of how I learned this, and this goes back a good number of years, to when I was, I had P&L responsibility for a manufacturing facility. And this was kind of as I was coming up and growing up, as I say, learning how to operate a business, but from a financial reporting perspective, right? That full cycle planning that I've talked about previously. And so, what was really interesting as these things kind of started to develop, right, shifting away from those lagging indicators, the traditional metrics that everybody knows and loves, right, to things that are more leading. It was interesting because we were able to kind of not only predict the future, right? So, like, 2 weeks into the month, I could take a look at a couple of KPIs that we had and pretty much know, like, how things were going to shake out, right? And that did a few things. It gave me the opportunity to act on that information, so I could kind of, gather the team and say, hey, here's where we're at. We need to kind of ramp up activity here. We need to do this, right? And in an effort ultimately to kind of influence, where the month was headed, right? The other thing that I could do with that is I could potentially, take on projects that I might not otherwise be interested in taking on. That was super interesting because that, I'll use the example, let's say, of we're getting close to the end of the month. We're having a relatively decent month. I feel pretty confident. I know where we're going to end up. I might take on a project, or, in the estimating and quoting stages, I might take a project and go ahead and estimate that if we can potentially close it by the end of the month at less margin. And why would I be willing to do that? Well, if I have a lot of confidence of where we're going to end up financially, right? And we've got all of our costs covered. We've got the ability to kind of influence from a contribution margin perspective with this project. So it's like, on paper, it looks like we're kind of taking a haircut in terms of profitability. But given the fact that we've already got enough volume to cover our fixed and variable expenses, that's kind of all gravy, right? So it can actually have a huge bump on both profitability and ultimately cash flow, depending on how, your receivables work, right? So that's kind of the power of this stuff, right? Like, that's just one example. And that's ultimately how I learned, the value of taking a look at those front end activities, right? The things that are ultimately, fall into the leading indicator category. And, again, it's not that we can't nor should, not monitor our lagging indicators, right? Like I still look at my financial reports for this business, even though I'm really only focused on my leading indicator of like valuable touch points, right? I still look at it. I still get financial reports, right? Like, so it doesn't mean I don't pay attention to those, but what it does mean is that I'm typically 2 to 4 weeks ahead of where I need to be, right? So the bigger the business, typically the longer it takes to close a period. And even in small businesses, I mean, in some cases, honestly, small businesses are much slower, right? Like it could be 30, 60. I've seen 90, like it's crazy. I don't even want to go there. But my whole point is that switching from the traditional lagging indicators to leading indicators gets the action, moves you from that reaction to being proactive in terms of saying like, hey, if we're, let's say, call and email volume is down, or product mix is way out of whack for some reason, it now gives me the ability to kind of influence and again gather the team and say, here's some things that we can probably do that will help us close out the month closer to plan than further away from plan, by just waiting to see how the month closed out, then waiting, in my case, I was waiting generally like a week to 2 weeks for our financial reports to kind of be circulated at month end close. So, if you think about that, right, like we're almost at the close of November, depending on how your financial periods work. But think about, you wouldn't get the results, right? And I'm recording this at the end of November, but you wouldn't get those results typically until, a week to, let's say, on average, 4 weeks, right? 30 days. So that means that everything you're looking at is already yesterday's news, right? How can you make that actionable when you've already close that period, gone another week to 4 weeks, let's say, right? You're so far behind track where if you shift and start to identify some more leading indicators, now instead of everybody saying, yep, makes total sense. Boy, I remember that. It was really slow. Now we can move into the, hey, here's what we should be doing, right? Or what do you guys think, and even better, right? Like, what do you guys think that we should be doing to ultimately influence the end of the month? So, as a reminder, too, I don't think I've mentioned this in this episode, but as a reminder, every solo episode is an extension of our free weekly newsletter, Business System Saturday. You can check out the website and sign up for that, and unsubscribe at any time if you're not getting value out of it. But I mentioned that because in the newsletter this past week, one of the other things that I talked about, and I really want to dive in here, is about this idea where, manual tracking versus dashboards. And I love dashboards. I think once you've established, your KPIs, it makes total sense to build out a dashboard. It makes total sense to, kind of automate that data flow and reporting so you're getting kind of real-time visibility. But what I see often is that, instead of let's say we're going to take a look at and identify, again, I'm going to use my business as the example here. Let's say that, in those days I was thinking, boy, I really need to get, some visibility on these meaningful touch points I keep talking about. Well, instead of building out some, complex dashboard with a lot of automated data flows and, fancy reporting, I could, just grab my yellow legal pad that's sitting next to me, or my little notebook that's sitting next to me, and just do tally marks, right? How many did I do today? Date, tally marks, date, tally marks, right? There's something so quick and simple about getting visibility on a thing, right? A KPI, to understand, one, did we capture what we need? Two, is this going to help us move the needle somehow, right? Without investing a bunch of resources into building something out. And, this I think was, I think this was a real struggle for me in the, kind of early days, I'll call it, because I love technology. I loved building things. I taught myself how to code. I built a lot of, kind of problem specific solutions using technology. And, today I talk a lot about technology kind of being, on the technology being last, right? Because it truly is the enabler. And the kind of fight for me in those early days was like, gosh, why don't we automate it? Like, it doesn't make sense to not automate it. And what I was missing was the point I'm articulating now, which is you can't build the tool, right? You can't buy the tool, configure the tool, implement the tool, build the tool, right? And it's so easy today to build something custom with all the vibe coding going on, right? But what the point is that you miss is that you don't even know what you're supposed to be building yet, right? Like, so capture it manually, kind of prove the concept, prove that this, metric, this thing that we've identified and now we want to measure is actually going to help us do something within the business, right? So again, it's this idea of, crawl, walk, run. Okay. I love the dashboard. I love automated reporting. I love, fully integrated reporting. I love, IoT devices. I love all of that stuff, but don't jump there, right? Like, let's start, let's learn to drive the car before we go and, buy the Ferrari, right? And that's just the whole point of what we need to do. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn because, again, I think as I was sharing, something totally different with somebody the other day, but it's this idea of like, we've been kind of raised, right? Like trained, bred to seek efficiency. And it's in everything we do. It's in the access that we carry around in our pockets, right? It's like the speed of everything. We're just born to seek efficiency within our bounds of responsibility. And what I've learned over time is that it very much becomes a more effective thing if we can slow down, kind of build out meaningful things. So in this case, it's all about how do we capture this data manually first? That could be tally marks. That could be, a log, a literal log. I've seen that be really effective for, let's say, like a product quality type of an issue or something customer facing, right? All of those types of things. So let's capture it manually first. Let's make sure that this is something really meaningful for us and that we can do something with this information before we go ahead and build out, some sort of more automated, reporting or specific dashboard. So, that's it for today. I want to thank you for, tuning in, for listening, for watching, however you're getting this information. Again, I would encourage you to check out the website and sign up for our Business System Saturday newsletter. And thanks so much. I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.